Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. This is the 142nd episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. You get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal. So go to bostonsportsjournal.com, get a subscription there also, and check all of that out. I have with me today longtime friend and colleague Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work.
My Rink Rap blog is always linked to X and Facebook, and I'm in the seasonal issues of the Hockey News.
Very good. So check all of that stuff out. Let's also thank our sponsors real quick before we get into it. Prize Picks, our good friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And let's also thank our friends at Game Time. If you want any kind of concert tickets, comedy tickets, definitely sports tickets, Bruins tickets, anything, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, of course, but download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Mick?
Game Time.
Game Time. That's right. Go check out Game Time, everybody. All right, Mick, let's just get right into it. Let's rip off the Band-Aid. Let's talk about it. I mean, this is not a surprise. This is something that we've discussed kind of ad nauseum as the Bruins sputtered and struggled through the start of this season after a very middling training camp and preseason. Jim Montgomery fired as the head coach of the Boston Bruins earlier this week, despite 120 wins over 2 and about a third seasons, which is pretty damn good. I think he leaves as the highest winning points percentage coach in Bruins history during the regular season as he got the game. Which is
hard to do.
It definitely is. But I mean, there's no question he had very good results, and some of it is skewed by like the best regular season of all time that first year. That's going to make his overall numbers look really good. But, you know, in general, very effective in the first 2 years during the regular season. But it was clear, I think, that he was not getting the most out of any of his players. They were a mess offensively, a mess defensively, a mess special teams wise, undisciplined, like so many areas where it didn't look like the coaching was getting through to the players. It didn't look like he was getting the best out of the players. And anytime that happens and you're running, 500 or below, and you're getting close to Thanksgiving when it's kind of nut cutting time as far as whether you're going to make the playoffs or not, you're going to see a team make a move. And I think, in a lot of ways, Jim Montgomery's paying the price for players where they couldn't fire everybody and make changes there. So you make a change with the coach.
So if your wins and losses are the same and you have loser points on top of that, that's what we call NHL 500, Larry Brooks' term.
Yes.
I agree with it. Because it's not true 500. The way to be at sea level is to win half your games and have the average number of loser points.
Right.
And so they didn't win half their games. They won fewer than half.
Right.
And,
so basically they're 8-12. If you were looking at them, you would say they're 8-12 and not 8-9-3.
More like that. Yeah, it's closer to that than it is to 500 in the sense of true, where are you really on the bubble? No, you're not. Yep. And they fell off. They were on the right side of it, then they're in the middle of another. And I thought that the 5-on-5 game had some traction until Hampus Lindholm blocked that shot, went out of the lineup. And then it just seemed like the boat was springing leaks every different way. It was something different every night, 2 shorthanded goals, yada, yada. And here we are.
Yeah. Don Sweeney, I appreciate the things that he said and the sentiments that he has in these situations. He stood there for a good 20, 25 minutes answering questions after the move, answered everything that came his way, tough questions, was pretty upfront and transparent, I thought, about like everything that went on, basically saying that, they had made offers to Jim Montgomery for contracts, which I'm sure were kind of lowball offers or less money than Montgomery thought he deserved. In the summertime to get him to agree to an extension. He did not agree to that extension, and so they went into the year without a contract. I mean, At a certain point, though, if you're Jim Montgomery and you want to keep this job and you want to have that security going into a lame duck year, you're going to agree to a contract, even if it's low ball, because, otherwise what happened is going to happen. You're not going to have the hammer once the season starts. If you're a lame duck coach, the players know you're in that situation, and it's going to be really difficult for you to keep things together and to have the kind of authority voice that you would have if you had years on your contract. And I think, maybe he underestimated how difficult that was going to be. Maybe he just felt like he's going to get other job offers and things will be out there for him if he leaves Boston. It's interesting. I'll be interested to hear his sort of like logic or what he was thinking in making sort of that decision to go into the year as a lame duck. All of that is interesting. But at the end,
I thought so too. That was the most curious moment of the day, was him saying that we're unsuccessful and trying to get an extension done. Imagine had they been successful, then what? So because this situation would have been a real pickle.
Well, look, Mick, though, like in these negotiations, sometimes if you're management, right, that if let's say they gave him like a 2% raise or something, from what he was making before. Let's say it was a minimal nominal raise over what he was making, which I think his original contract was very low money. From NHL head coaching standards. So management probably knew he wasn't going to accept that contract offer based on what it was, but it gives them the ability to say, hey, we made a contract offer. We wanted to keep him, so they don't seem like the bad guys that weren't interested in keeping Montgomery and kind of setting up this situation. So it may be semantics on some level when you look at contract negotiations and, them just being able to say, hey, we made offers. He didn't want to accept them, whatever. But I also think like clearly they didn't give him a huge money offer to try to keep him because they had questions about him as far as the penalties and the lack of discipline that's been going on the last couple of years, the lack of impressive performance in the playoffs. Some of the things that were going on, I think they still had questions about Jim Montgomery and whether he was the long-term guy. And I'm sure that colored negotiations and is part of the reason we saw what happened, over the summer and going into this year. But the end of the day, if you cover the NHL long enough and you cover pro sports in general long enough, unless it's like Paul Maurice going into this season without a contract beyond this year, coming off a Stanley Cup year, knowing it's based on him just wanting to come back and it's going to get done. Anything short of that, if you go into the season as a coach and you're in the last year of your deal and you're a lame duck, it's setting up for a really bad situation for you. And it's really difficult to be able to perform and to do your job as best you can under those kind of situations.
I tend to think that Monty must have just figured I deserve better, considering how I knocked. He gave me an all-star lineup, and I knocked it out of the park to historic proportions.
Yep.
Then you gave me a team with no top six centermen, established players in that role, and I gave you contention for the President's Trophy and the division for most of the season, and we won a series. And so I think he was probably thinking, come on, you guys got to do better than this. And from their end, I got to give some credence to what you just said about your thing with the penalties and the too many men on the ice. When you asked Donnie that yesterday, he really hung his head and shook it and really kind of felt like, well, you've hit on something here.
Yeah.
And I realized that, I know that you've banged this drum quite a bit in this podcast, and I've always kind of figured, give it some time, it'll flatten out. So I haven't really, I haven't stomped on one foot and clapped as you've done so, but I realize that you have a better point than I've been giving you credit for.
Well, thank you, Mick. I appreciate
Fair
that.
fair.
But I like, it's pretty obvious when you coach. I think when you start coaching even kids and you see some of the stuff that the players are doing, you're like, all right, if you have control of the players and you have control of the room, they're not going to do some of the stuff that they're doing here. And
that's one of the first ways you're going to see it.
And they feel like they can just do whatever they want out there and make all these mistakes. And there's clearly no accountability for it. And they don't care or worried about the aftermath of what's going to happen when they're taking all these offensive zone penalties. Like the perfect example, and I told you this, it was funny that Don Sweeney used Marchand taking a penalty against Calgary as an example of something where he had to pull him aside and be like, look, you can't do that. the GM shouldn't have to do that. That's the coach's job to do that, and he should be doing that. And the fact that the GM had to do that says something about the coach not being, not doing his job as far as accountability goes with the players to the best of his ability. But like the hockey person that I talked to rolled their eyes about how the Bruins players all talked about, like, discipline and not taking penalties, and it needs to be better. And then the very next game, David Pastrnak takes an offensive zone penalty like 9 seconds into the game.
That's been Pasta this year, for sure.
But it's been the Bruins in general. You know what I mean? And that tells you right there that there is no fear of retribution from the coaching staff with the players when they do stupid things like this. When they. Well,
I don't think they're cognizant of that, but I do think you're bringing up something that's very important.
I think they are.
I think that subconsciously there's an urgency level that a coach has control of a team. Like when a team makes a big trade and all of a sudden everybody wakes up and says, that could have been me and I might be next. I think that all of a sudden the coach has their team. And I think that the Bruins were in a situation, it's like, that's like the ultimate stage. The middling stage is just good discipline. The Bruins were in that below stage, like the kind where, how many hundreds of high school games have you and I covered for newspapers over our years? And you go there and you see a team that's just completely undisciplined. Fair or unfair, it's a reflection on the coach.
Of course. Of course. And like, I felt like that all along. It's one of several things that you watch and you're like, that's on the coaching staff. Like it's on the players, obviously, but it's also on the coaching staff to not get them to stop doing that and to get that straightened out. That's on the coaches to do. Otherwise, it's a poor reflection on them. Just like special teams at the end of the day is on the coaches. Like it's on the players to execute, no question. But it's also on the coaches to come up with an adjustment or come up with a strategy that's going to straighten things out and at both ends. And none of that was happening. So like there's like 2 or 3 things where you're watching all year and you're like, that's coaching. Like that is what you're looking for. The other part is getting the best out of your players, like and squeezing the best out of your players. That's another thing that's on coaching. Like it's certainly it's on the players too, but it's on the coaches to get the best out of the players and to get the maximum performance they can out of the players by whatever means they have to use. And across the board, there wasn't a single player that I think was at their highest level. There was a few players, Hampus Lindholm's one of them, I thought were playing pretty well and doing okay and certainly playing close to their potential. And I thought he was one of the best players in the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, Zaka as well.
Yeah, well, Zaka wasn't finishing enough, I think. But he was
I felt like his tenacity and effort was sort of exemplary during the worst of times.
Yeah.
And I felt
he was getting, I think, the best chances of like a lot of the Bruins forwards quite a bit,
Yeah, because he generated them. Yeah, I was really impressed with his game when so many others were failing. And I felt like guys were coming along. Obviously, Swayman went back to having some serious hiccups after his game looked like it had progressed back towards something closer to his representative level.
Yeah.
And then, Morgan Geekie just seemed to me like he was stuck in thought, like he couldn't play, he couldn't move his feet, he couldn't decide what he was supposed to be doing out there. Yeah. And Frederick, to a lesser degree, I felt like they both improved. Geekie more dramatically, but then it just seemed like once Lindholm went down, something happened in the mind of the team where every night it was something different. It was like the boat kept springing leaks, and it could be like they can't kill a penalty. They get scored on shorthanded twice in the power play.
Yeah,
it's like a bad goaltending night. It's just like every night it was something. And at the end of the day, even though I thought the 5-on-5 game had come along, I just felt then was the injuries, and Monty couldn't outrun it. And they ought to be thinking about, what about the rest of the season? Are we going to let all this investment in this roster just go down? Once they realized, hey, we're 20 games in here. I thought it would have happened sooner. I would have done it sooner. They didn't. They went to 20 and decided this is it.
Yeah. And Don Sweeney's a very deliberate guy. I think he thinks things out. He measures, 3 times before he cuts kind of guy. He's very deliberate with his decisions, and I think that's a good thing. And I don't think he wanted to rush it or panic the decision, because I don't think he wanted to fire Montgomery. I take him for his word. I believe him that he really didn't want to do what he had to do, but he felt like it was the necessary move at this point. And I agree with him. I think it's the move you had to make. to give this team a jolt to see if they can respond. And it was, the time to do it. But I also think, I think sometimes, Mick, you give the players more credit than they should be getting in certain instances. Sometimes I give them less. I think sometimes you give them more. And like the Morgan Geekie thing, I think he's one of those players that Don Sweeney was talking about yesterday when he said some players think they're better. They think they had good years last year and think that it's going to be easier for them and they don't have to work quite as hard or do what they did previously to have success. And I think that has bled into like a lot of what we've seen this year is not the same level of work, not the same level of intensity, not the same level of urgency. And I think Morgan Geekie's one of those guys. He was all about like his success. The bedrock of his game is based on second and third effort on pucks, being a hard skill, being a guy that like will hang on to it, doesn't look pretty, but somehow gets through traffic and defenders with the puck.
Follows him.
even though he doesn't look dazzling, he's able to overpower guys and he's able to use his tenacity and his strength and his heaviness on the puck to get through and to make plays happen. And he gets in front of the net a lot and he does a lot of these different things. Yeah. And he was going away from that. And that he was not that guy at the beginning of the year. And I don't think he was thinking. I just think he wasn't working as hard. And I think there's a bunch of players in there that were not working at the level that they were last year. And that's part of what we've seen. And it was more than one guy. I think it was a whole group of them that did not come with the same mentality this year that they had last year. And I think it really has been a problem. And again, I think that goes back to coaching. I think this is my theory, okay? Jim Montgomery, I feel like, was like the rebound girlfriend of NHL coaches after Bruce Cassidy, okay? Bruce Cassidy was hard, he was mean, he was tough on the players. The players didn't want it anymore, and they wanted a nice guy with a soft touch that was going to be a player's coach and give them a pat on the butt and tell them they're doing great and go back out there. And it worked for a little while, especially when Bergeron was still here. It worked because Bergeron was kind of a player coach. I think he had that level of respect in the room where they were going to do right just because Bergie was there and he was watching and he was going to make sure that they were doing what they needed to do. And that was a big help to Montgomery in that first year. But I think as it's gone on, you could see that the nice guy approach from Montgomery was not getting the same results. And I think when he tried to flip the dial and become a little bit more of a hardline coach that was trying to like motivate by like, barking on the bench, scratching guys, like doing other things, it was having less and less impact. And it was less and less impactful because I don't think the players were taking it seriously. And I think it just didn't have as much resonance with them the more that he did it. And so I think he was never going to be the answer because he was kind of the rebound coach after Cassidy. And I think they need to find the guy that's going to be able to bring the best out of these players and get them back to where they are. And it's probably going to have to be a coach that's a little more of a hard ass and is going to kick them in the ass a little bit more than Montgomery did. And maybe they realize that they should have somebody a little bit more like Cassidy and the other half just wasn't going to get it done and push them over the finish line. And I think that's part of what we're seeing now is that I've felt all along. I like Jim Montgomery. I think he knows hockey. I think he's a good guy. I think he is probably would be an excellent college coach. If he goes back to, and I saw something today, maybe he's going to go back to St. Louis as an assistant. I think that would be great for him, something like that. I'm not sure if he's a great NHL head coach. And I just am not convinced of what I saw over the last couple of years that he's like a special NHL coach, head coach. I think you have to have some other attributes that I'm not sure he has in order to be effective over a long period of time as an NHL coach. Maybe he's better as an assistant. That's more of like, the sounding board for the players, a guy that keeps it positive, like the role that an assistant coach can play with much more ease, I think plays into his strengths more than being a head guy, where sometimes you have to be a taskmaster and a little bit of an a-hole in order to get things done and to get players doing what you want them to do. And that's kind of my sort of read on like the Jim Montgomery term and as we move forward, as to what happened over the last couple of years.
I don't really disagree with the theory. I think it's possible that you're right. I think these are the kinds of things that unfold over the course of a career.
Yeah.
And and then maybe later I'll say, yeah, okay, I guess you had it, I look at the geeky thing and say, okay, Seattle didn't protect him.
Yeah.
He comes to the Bruins and he knocks it out of the park. They are able to elevate him. maybe because of it being so infancy stage of being a top 9 NHLer, going from rags to riches, so to speak, in your career cachet, that it was too soon for him to understand exactly what it was going to take in order for him to approach the season the right way. Because it's in him, and he's had a couple of good games since he got knocked out of the lineup there a little bit and humbled, and so he's got great hand-eye. He doesn't skate like Jake DeBrusk, but he's got great hand-eye.
Yep.
But he does what he does very well when he's highly motivated. And I think that this is going to be a shakeup that should bring out a good brand in him for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And at this point, Mick, we're going to take a time out and thank our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun, and it's really simple. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinion into real money all season long on Prize Picks. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the hockey board, and I'm selecting Connor McDavid with more than 22 minutes of ice time on ice, and Brad Marchand with more than 2.5 shots on goal. I think you can take the Marchand one to the bank, being highly motivated after the coach firing. So I would go all in on Bruins on Prize Picks to do really well in the next few games. I also have Connor Bedard for more than 2.5 shots on goal and Jack Hughes for less than 3.5 shots on goal. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. What is better than that? So download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Mick. I think you're right. I think great points about the Bruins there, and Morgan Geeky, and as I was saying in the Prize Picks read, I think you're going to see a big response for the Bruins. Like something was wrong with this team, the coach, the player combination. Like something was going on there. I feel like, where across the board players were not playing hard and well and as good as they can, and were just making some really curious decisions on the ice, and the way that they were playing looked unlike. So many players looked unlike what I usually see out of them that it spoke to me like something was going on. So I think we're going to see a much better Bruins team, a much more focused Bruins team, a much more effective Bruins team. I think we're going to see something similar to last year from this point moving forward, because I just think there's going to be a reaction to the coaching change, and I think it's going to jolt everything back into place to what it should be. And I think you'll see players across the board start to playing much more to their norm and their usual NHL standard. And I also think that, we're going to see a team that understands now, and the players that understand now it's on them. Like the coach is gone. Like you can't lay it at Monty's feet, let him take all the heat that he's going to get fired and be the person to blame for all these decisions, all these things, mistakes that are being made on the ice and the way that you're playing. Once that happens and the coach is gone, the pressure goes on the players that got the coach fired, and the pressure goes on management that put that coach into place and put these players in the roster out there on the ice. And if they don't turn it around, both roster-wise with the players and management-wise with making decisions, like they're going to be in the crosshairs next. Like the coach is gone now. The easy blame guy is gone. The fall guy is gone. So now the pressure is on everybody else to perform, and I think that's part of the reason why you're going to see everybody straighten up, fly right, and play much closer to like what they usually play from the rest of the season as well.
I also think that while Joe Sacco told us yesterday after practice that he is not going to be making any substantial system hockey strategy changes, it was already evident to me the aggression with which players were playing incrementally in the system that they do have. For instance, 5-on-5 drill, defensemen, if the puck goes to their side of the ice and the puck's in the corner, they darted into that corner and became fully engaged without looking to their right, looking to their left and say, do I have a forward here to do this for me?
Yep.
So I can go back and protect my patch of ice? So it wasn't, it wasn't reckless abandon, but it was definitely more of that resolution, kind of like the way Scott Gordon used to want the Providence Bruins to play. He never wanted a point man to have to look over his shoulder for support before he decides whether to pinch down to the half wall in order to defenseman to pinch down to the half wall to support the puck. He wanted them to do it on instinct.
Just react.
And for it's on your teammates to read that and be there for you.
Yep.
And so that you don't lose that precious part of a second. And I feel like that's how the defense is going to play now, going to the corners. I feel like that's how the penalty killers, the high guys are playing when the point-to-point passes are traded. Those guys are darting. They're sprinting out to those guys to confront those puck-receiving point men. And so the Bruins are going to add a new dimension of hurry up to the opponent and challenge them the way the Bruins have been challenged this season all year long by teams that have been challenging the Bruins, not so much through great tactical decisions, but through just hurrying their game, forcing them to do things quicker than they want to do them. The Bruins are now going to really try to do that to the opponent. And I'm looking forward to the result. I'm looking forward to a little more of a north-south game. And I think that while Joe Sacco says he's going to take what they got and work with that he said there will be changes, but those will come later.
Right.
But I do see things already right now where gray areas are being swallowed up by aggression.
Yeah, and look, the one thing I latched onto that Joe Sacco said, and to a lesser degree Don Sweeney said, or a greater degree, I guess, Don Sweeney said, we are not a hard out right now. We're just too easy to play against. We're not a hard out when you play us, and you come into the TD Garden, teams aren't thinking they have a long night's work ahead of them with the way that the team is playing. And Joe Sacco basically said it starts from our own net front and on out, in the D zone on out. And I do think Jim Montgomery's kind of an offensive coach. I think he coached them to hang on to pucks, to try to make plays. I don't think defense was ever his strong suit, and I don't think that part of the game was ever like his calling card, like it was certainly for Claude Julien and to a lesser degree Bruce Cassidy, but the same. Like, they were both very focused on tightening up the defense and making sure the D zone was taken care of first. And I think they got away from that principle a little bit under Jim Montgomery, and I think there's going to be a renewed emphasis on that with Joe Sacco taking over. And I think he's a guy that is going to pound it in their heads that they need to play right in the D zone, make sure the coverage is good in front, make sure they're clearing pucks, make sure they're playing hard and being tough to play against, like all the things that you have typically seen out of the Bruins that you didn't see as much this year is going to be back to basics as far as focusing attention on that. And I think that will lead to success, and that will lead to the Bruins being better and being harder to play against, and that will translate into the offensive end as well. And I also think they're going to probably go away from quality over quantity offensive philosophy, where Monty wasn't about the shots on net as much as he was about the chances that they were generating. And that would lead to sometimes less pressure in the offensive zone, less possession in the offensive zone, less creating chaos in the other team's D zone by putting pucks on net and watching everybody start to scramble after, things get a little chaotic in the net front. And I think going back to a little more of that mindset of getting pucks on net, I think is a smart thing and a good thing to do, especially with the personnel that they have. They don't have a bunch of like playmaking Wayne Gretzky's out there on this Bruins roster right now. I think they need to play a little simpler, more simple offensive hockey, putting pucks on net, crashing the net, getting rebounds, like creating off the chaos when that happens. I think that's more of what this team should be doing. It's more of what the forward group is made up of roster-wise. And it's going to be more of like what's going to give them success in the playoffs at the end of the day, is playing that way as well. So I think there are some things here that I liked that I heard in those press conferences between Joe Sacco and Don Sweeney yesterday, that the Bruins are going to get back to playing more Bruins-like hockey than what we've seen certainly over the last 20 games.
Well, my question to Donnie was is it possible that the puck possession with a lot of passing game that Jim Montgomery coached similar to Robbie Ftorek when he had the team around 2001 to 2003. Is it possible that this team is not a good fit for it without Bergeron or Krejci out there for 40 minutes a game?
Yep.
And he entertained the thought and said, yeah, it could very well be the case. We'll see as we go along, that this is hard to know. As far as the D zone goes, the blueprint that Paul Maurice gave the rest of the league for the Bruins in their zone D and doing the hard arounds and hemming them in and then getting changes against them and making it hard on the Bruins, I think that we're going to see that go away, because what's going to happen here with more aggression coming, a more liberal approach toward that by Sacco's teams and defensemen going hard to the corners, we're going to see more successful plays by the opponent. We're also going to see them hurried and get knocked down and more transition for the Bruins. We're going to see fewer episodes of the Bruins standing in a box and one and having the puck go around the boards, and they're in their zone for 3 minutes, or at least for a wasted shift of a top six line. I think that's going to go away now, and how it happens and how successful the Bruins are in making the transition and how revised pro scouting on it and seeing, I think that's going to have a lot to do with how good the Bruins get this year.
Yeah, I think it's all about adjustments now from what we've seen and what wasn't working in the first part of the season. Let's take a pause here to thank our sponsors at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time for obviously your Bruins tickets, but also if you're looking for tickets for the Patriots, Celtics, or even comedy or concert tickets in the upcoming future. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can tell you right now, I think the big game for this week is going to be Saturday night's Bruins game against the Detroit Red Wings at Little Caesars Arena, and a big Atlantic divisional matchup in Hockeytown. I looked on the Game Time site and saw that the super deal right now is $103 in the mezzanine at Little Caesars Arena to watch the Wings and the Bruins play Original Six hockey, and that is a fantastic value. That's a lot cheaper than you're going to get at the Garden. It would probably be cheaper to fly out to Detroit and get the Game Time $103 super deal tickets in Motown to go watch the Bruins play than it would probably be for parking and tickets and everything else to go to the Garden on a Saturday night and watch the Bruins in Boston. So head out to Detroit, Bruins fans, and be safe if you go out there. But use Game Time to get your tickets to go to Little Caesars Arena and use the super deal, which is pretty amazing and much cheaper than you could get in Boston, like I said. Game Time has some great features. Priority Game Time picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. The all-in pricing, you toggle this feature, and it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And who doesn't hate the surprise fees? Also, the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's just fantastic, backing up your words with your actions there. 110% guarantee. If they don't give you the lowest price, what's better than that? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase at Game Time. Terms do apply, of course, but download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Mick?
Let's get this in the picture here. It's game time.
Time.
That's from my third Bruins game, 69-70 season against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I like
with
it.
A maskless Bob Daly in net.
If only Game Time was around in 1969, Mick, you could have used it to get.
I would have gone to more games, I can tell you that.
That's right. All right. Do you believe, Mick, in your heart of hearts here, that the Bruins are going to turn it around now in the wake of the coaching change?
Yep, I do. But to turn it around, I think they're going to play a lot better hockey.
Well, be a playoff team,
I think
finish top three in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I think that's fair assessment. I just feel like there's so many teams that have been one game north or south of NHL 500 so deep into this year that the NHL has gone from being a team with, like 2 or 3 seasons ago, the Eastern Conference had 8 100-point teams.
Yep.
And now the whole league is 8 and 7. So I think the Bruins won't meander there. I think it's amazing that they've been that good, that successful on paper, given all that's been wrong. And when you consider all that's going to get fixed here and the traction that they're going to receive out of that, I think guys will find it refreshing to play a less intellectual kind of a game and more of a hard, simple game. I think we're going to see some of that. And I think that that'll probably suit the roster better too, the changing roster here. So I'm looking forward to them grinding through the middle here, and there'll be some ups and downs, but I think the hockey is going to get a little more palatable.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you see it so many times. Saw it with Edmonton last year, where they made a coaching change. We saw it certainly in St. Louis in 2019 when Berube took over. Like, there are some situations where teams are underperforming, and a coaching change just does wonders, and it turns things around pretty quickly. And I feel like we could see that here. I felt like, and I think Don Sweeney has the same feeling about this Bruins team, that they are much more talented, and the talent ceiling is much higher than what we've seen in the first 20 games, and they've really underperformed across the board. And I'll be very surprised if the struggles continue in a lot of these areas after the coaching change, with the jolt that they got from that. I just feel like it's gonna reset a lot of these players, and they're gonna go back to what they normally do and how they normally play, and that's gonna significantly elevate the level of play across the board and the results that they're getting. And I think that's what we're gonna see. Now, if that doesn't happen, that's like when you need to resettle expectations on the players, the team, your long-term view. Like, that's when I think you start entertaining trades of players, with not a lot of guys being untouchable players. Like, that's going to change your whole sort of worldview on what this Bruins team is and who they are and where they're going. I just don't think we're there yet. I think they're much better than they've shown in the first 20 games. Like, they've played like absolute dog crap, Mick, I feel like, most of the time, and they're still only 8-9-3, and they're still in a wild card playoff spot. So, like, you know, they're still very much in it. They're very much within shouting distance of being where they need to be and where they want to be. And they've played like hot garbage for a lot of the first 2 months of the season. So I think that gives you a lot of optimism as to how good they're going to be when they get things straightened out and when they're playing a lot better and when players return to form.
They'll be formidable.
Yeah. So I think they're going to be a much better team. I just feel like that's going to be the case. And I think, you know, we see enough evidence of that, both in where they are right now in the standings and where they are vis-a-vis every single player and where they usually are as far as their potential and how they're playing this year. Let me ask you this, tweet of the week from JM Flam. What's Joe Sacco like? Is he towards side of the tough guy curve, brilliant tactician, button pusher? Him being assistant coach sounds kind of like the Mayo situation in Bill Belichick's last year, inevitable. I don't think it was inevitable that Joe Sacco was going to take over. I think he's the most qualified, and it makes sense for him to take over. He's paid his dues. He's been here a long time.
Why didn't he get the job last time?
Yeah, I also could see him as interim coach for the rest of the year, and then they bring in somebody else next season, and he stays on staff as an assistant, goes back to kind of being the associate head coach because he's been here so long and he's been through a bunch of different coaches. I think he's a very trusted guy, and he's a very knowledgeable guy, and I think he's very well respected in the Bruins organization. So, you know, I could see that happening as well. But, you know, it was interesting to hear Joe Sacco talk about this yesterday, where he was in his late 30s when he got his last head coaching gig, and he feels like he's a much more mature, sort of like experienced coach now, able to take over in a much better way and able to run things in a much better way. And he understands both the X's and O's and the personal touch that's needed when you're coaching men in the NHL and building relationships with all of your players. In addition,
that was what he really got into.
Yeah, to the hockey stuff. So I'm interested to see how he's going to operate. I think he's a very straightforward guy. I don't think he's going to play games like John Tortorella. I don't think he's, going to be this like mastermind coach. I don't think that's him. I think he's a smart hockey guy. I think he's done a very good job with the penalty kill. He knows what he's doing. But I think he's a guy that I think will get the respect of the players because he's going to be very straightforward with everything and upfront with everything. But he's also, I don't think, going to be a guy that beats around the bush or tries to blow smoke on anything or anybody. And I think he's going to tell it like it is, which I think we could all use a steady dose of at this point.
I'm assuming that, he said he's going to keep the PK, that Chris Kelly will keep the power play.
Yeah.
And which I always would have assumed that was backwards. People think I'm saying that backwards or not. But he said that, but I tend to think that his fingers are going to be all over everything that happens here and in a more less of a delegating and more of an involved kind of a way.
Yeah.
Not that you don't trust people, but that this is a crisis time of the season for the Bruins, and it requires this kind of attention until you feel like you got the traction you need in all of these ways. So I fully expect to see his stamp and little pieces of influence coming through here. He looks really chiseled, by the way. Joe Sacco looks like he's training to fight Tyson. When he was up in front of us yesterday, I'm thinking like, what's with all the bones in your face today? And I'm thinking this guy does not look like a comfortable. He looks like one of these, war horse coaches who's ready for it. And I began thinking, I thought all along that he was going to get canned as well because he'd been here forever. And that Jay Leach, whom they were grooming in Providence, and then lost to Seattle and now have back on their bench.
Yep.
And then maybe bring up Mujanel and give the Providence team to Trent Whitfield. I thought maybe something like that. And instead, it's Joe Sacco. And I'm saying, well, did he want the head coaching job when Bruce Cassidy was fired? Why didn't he get it then? I realize these questions they're really, really appropriate yesterday in the middle of that. They wouldn't have drawn favorable answers. It would have been one of those things that it's my duty, so I must ask. And it's not that important. So maybe someday we'll find all that out. I don't know. But I was really impressed with Joe Sacco yesterday. Yeah. And he just seems like he's really mentally ready for this. He feels awful about what happened, but he understands that this is the business. This is how you get your opportunities a lot of the time.
Yep.
Peter Laviolette, funny story. He and Paul Maurice have been fired for each other repeatedly. Taking over the Carolina Hurricanes. Maurice actually started when they were still in Hartford. And Peter wound up, Maurice gets fired. Peter takes the team. They win the Stanley Cup after the lockout year. Peter, a few years later, gets fired. Who do they bring in? Paul Maurice. He beats the Bruins in that second round 7-game series at the Garden in 2009. And so this goes back and forth. And he says, oh, yeah, actually, we get along great and everything. I said, do you guys just use each other's houses? He goes, no, we're not that tight. So.
No, I'm sure there's a professional respect, but that's as far as it goes,
Yeah. He's better friends with Cooper.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. I'll be interested to see too who and when they potentially add somebody else to the bench, who that ends up being. Could it be an ex-Bruins player that's around in the area? Like, who knows? Maybe for the rest of the season, that could be interesting. If they go that route, I wonder
if add someone.
Yeah. I wonder if it would be somebody that's more of like a power play sort of like specialist guy, somebody that could come in that's more of an offensive mind and bring that element to the coaching staff. Chris Kelly's a great guy. I highly respect him as a coach and a hockey person. I'm not sure he's the first person I would think of as the guy you want running your power play just based on who he was as a player.
I would have just thought it the opposite of what it is.
Yeah.
that he'd be the PK. And right. But then again, hey, we take ourselves seriously enough as far as the experience we have just as observers of professional hockey all these years and chroniclers of it. And so how much more should people who are in the trenches and sitting in those offices all day long know exactly what needs to be done here and be quite capable of deciding what to do with it. And I don't think the Bruins are looking to complicate anything.
You can say that, Mick, but like they also had a horrible training camp and they're off to a horrible start. So maybe the decisions that they made this year haven't been the greatest and got them to where they are. So maybe they should be thinking outside the box a little bit and switching things up a little. I think there's a great argument to be made that maybe they need to investigate their own, methods and methodologies and what they've been doing. Because it didn't work this year.
All under review now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like as Don Sweeney, I will give full credit to Don Sweeney for always being accountable as far as saying, look, my head's always on the chopping block just like everybody else, and I'm always being evaluated. And, he knows, he gets it. He's been in this business a long time.
And you know what? If we get to the end of the season and this thing doesn't go north and they wind up missing the playoffs on the last day of the season, then he's 10 years into his tenure. He's exactly where Peter Chiarelli was in 2015. He will be out of the playoffs on the last day of the season. He will have a team that's up against the cap, and he will not have a good prospect system and draft capital.
Yep.
And that is what got Peter Chiarelli fired. Donnie Sweeney is like, The pressure's every day. This is the expectation around here. We're never off, not on notice.
Yep.
That sounds miserable when you think about it. It sounds daunting. How do you somehow give yourself a Novocaine from that so you can think freely and operate and everything like that? These are highly successful professionals. Donnie Sweeney went to Harvard.
Yep.
He's played hockey for 2 decades. Or, he's been in the trenches. He's been in the bowels of the Providence Civic Center, sitting in coaches' meetings forever and developing players. They are where they are, and it's no wonder that he's gotten a full decade as GM. And we'll see where it goes from here. Well, this season will decide it, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, all that being said, I think he's also the winningest GM since he entered the league as a GM over the tenure of him running the Bruins. Like, they've had some incredibly successful seasons.
There are very few teams that average 50 wins per 82, and the Bruins, since Sweeney has had his own coach, has been 51 per 82, not counting this season.
Yeah, and, like, everybody's up in arms about, all the Jack Adams coaches that have been fired since he took over, but those guys get fired too. Like, it happens. Like,
it's part of the business. If you're not Scotty Bowman, it happens.
It's not the NFL where guys are head coaches for like 25, 30 years and they stay in the same place. It's not the way it is in hockey. It never has been.
Look at Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah.
He's a great hockey coach. Very similar to what went on with Bruce Cassidy and Joe Sacco had that great year in Colorado. And now he says he's more mature now and understands way better what the job is. Well, Sullivan, Cassidy, a long time between opportunity 1 and opportunity 2. And they finally get it. And look what those guys did with it.
Yeah. How about if Mike Sullivan gets let go by Pittsburgh, a second return trip to Boston?
I'm ahead of you on that one.
How about that?
I'm already having my social media debates with people. Are you suggesting to me? They can't bear the thought. And I'm like, don't rule it out.
I mean, he's a really good hockey coach. Like, he's not the warm and fuzzy personality like with the media, and I don't think he ever will be. Like, he's kind of a straightforward guy, and I think he has loosened up to a degree since when he was in Boston way back when.
Oh, God, yeah.
But he's a great hockey coach. Brilliant
absolutely.
Tactician, brilliant manager of players. There's no denying that he is an excellent hockey coach.
When he was with Tortorella all those years, unfortunately, he got swallowed into the Tortorella identity.
Yeah.
And when he didn't know what he was going to do, he was at a crisis point in his career. He went up to see Cap Raider way up in Vermont. And Cap called me after this visit with Sully, and he said, "You mark my words, this guy's going to be the best coach in the NHL. I'm telling you right now."
Yep.
And he felt the same way about him when he was helping out in Tampa, that this is. And the reason is, he said, once he unearths himself from torts and has his own identity again, and he had to go to the AHL to do it, just like Bruce Cassidy did.
Yep.
And it came out. Now he said, I just feel like Pittsburgh's run its course.
Yeah.
It's run its course, and it just seems like nothing he does anymore. It just seems like that's, unfortunately, that's where they're at.
And the Fenway Sports Group that owns them now is going to start parceling off like the expensive pieces, and they're going to do, it's part of the portfolio, just like the Red Sox. They're going to run it that way. So like, I think that the golden era of the Penguins is kind of at an end anyway. So like, I agree with you 100%. But it's going to be really interesting if he gets freed of that contract that he's in Pittsburgh and becomes a free agent coach, like what could happen after this year is over. Joel Quenneville's another one that I think would be an interesting fit here in Boston as he looks to break back into an NHL gig. Like, I do think, like, I really can envision a scenario where Joe Sacco coaches the rest of this year, and then there's some, like, kind of full-blown coaching search, after the year is over, depending on how things go, obviously. I hope Joe does a great job. Yeah. I hope they, go on a run in the playoffs, all those things. If that happens, I think he would be the guy. And
then you're not doing it. Yeah.
No, and it's great that he's getting the opportunity here to run the show and see what he can do. Just like you're mentioning with Sully and, with Bruce Cassidy, he's in that same situation of getting that second crack at a time when he really has figured some things out and is probably in a better place to coach. So maybe Joe Sacco could be in that same category with those guys of really figuring it out and having great success the second time around. So that will be interesting to watch. Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks run your game. Also, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, of course, but download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Mick?
Game time.
Game time. All right, Mick, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure, Joe.
Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We will see you at the range.